Okay. Welcome everybody to the webinar Diversity Collective Lanka is hosting on the topic of well-being, which I think is very, very relevant. It has been relevant, more relevant, I'm going to say, since the pandemic. But right now in Sri Lanka, I think, is again getting a wave of where we are all very frustrated, and there's a lot of high tension happening with all the other crises we're managing at the moment. So I think this is very timely, even though I've been talking to Chetha and Ranil for years on this topic and trying to get them onto this session. So thank you so much for joining Diversity Collective Lanka on this conversation. I am going to apologize in advance because power crisis is a little bit of an issue, so there might be little hiccups. But as they say, the show must go on, and that's kind of what I'm focusing on right now. Thank you, Chetha. Thank you, Ranil, for joining.
You're welcome.
Let's get started straight away. CCCline, can you all sort of tell me the impetus behind it and how the whole well-being angle connected, and how you two became kind of the main sponsors and the main partners to this whole topic?
I'm going to leave that to Ranil. He's the main guy at CCCline.
Okay, Ranil.
Well, the reason for 1333 to start is the other gentleman on the screen, Jeta, because I mean he's been very open with his story, and that is what makes it great. Because he suffered, for a brief period through OCD, and he was able to come out of it, and he realized that there is help out there. So he wanted to extend that same helping hand to Sri Lanka. And Jeta is our founder, CEO. He's in Australia, but I always say, though he's in Australia, his heart is in Sri Lanka. At least now a part of his heart, because he has two beautiful girls in Australia, so I'm sure it's all there. So CCCline is under CCC Foundation, which is a non-for-profit charity run by volunteers. It was founded from 2009, and we've come a long way with 13 years. The CCCline, the number is 1333. And 1333 is the only toll-free crisis support service in Sri Lanka, which runs for 24 hours. There are other services. There are many other services which we are partnered and which we support our people. But 1333 is the only toll-free line. And it's 24 hours. It's confidential. And we service in all 3 languages. And it's available for anyone. Even if you don't have credit on your phone, you can dial, and we have trained crisis supporters who are ready to listen to you and support you. We are trained under the Lifeline model, Lifeline Australia model, and we are also affiliated with Lifeline International and International Association for Suicide Prevention. So that's just a brief introduction about CCCline or 1333.
Thank you so much, Ranil. You're right. I definitely wanted that information because I think that's very relevant, and you can't say it enough times, because I think the need for it, sometimes we underestimate. And I'd like to bring the conversation into that aspect of it, the well-being, the emotional and mental well-being component. If you could maybe share a little bit more from a perspective of somebody who feels like I need help, but maybe I don't need to call a hotline. How would somebody navigate that feeling of, do I need to call a hotline, or if I just talk to a friend, that's good enough? How would I deal with that situation like that?
Well, actually, from the start, we have always encouraged people to talk to one another. Right? If you talk to a friend, a family member, if you're in school, one of your teachers, or a religious leader, somebody, talk to someone whom you trust and whom you can reach out to. If you don't have anyone, then talk to 1333, right? And remember, like we said, it's a confidential call. So we won't take personal details or anything unless during the call we need to, but otherwise we don't. None of your number doesn't appear, so it's confidential. And but we always encourage people to first talk to your village, basically. And if you don't have anyone to talk to, then talk to 1333, because it's important to talk, right? And I think Jeta can emphasize a little more on that.
Yeah, it's spot on, Ranil. End of the day, Barney, if they feel that they can talk to someone in their own village, we call it, or in their own circles, that is as good or even better than calling a helpline, because in any instance, it's the human connection that matters. Okay, it's that trust that matters. Whether it be a professional counselor, if it's your mom, whether it's your husband or wife or brother or sister, it's that connection that really matters. It's the trust that really matters. And it's that connection that offers support. And if it's something that is something like mental illness that needs further support, then definitely it needs to be referred to a professional, either counselor or professional psychologist and other services. But really what 1333 offers is when people are in a situation where they feel they can't talk to their own village, they can't reach out to their family, their friends, their neighbor, they can always reach out to 1333. But the funny thing is, now we are realizing that as a counseling service or as a crisis support service, we need to do more, because end of the day, it's a funny thing. I always say to Ranil, if we were a corporate business, we need to be planning to go out of business. What I mean by that is, we have a responsibility and an obligation as mental health providers to build the village in our own family unit, between our work colleagues. And hence, in the last couple of years, probably longer, we've been launching the Let's Talk program. So the Let's Talk program, we can talk later about that, is specifically to empower everyday people, not professional counselors, but everyday people like you and me, to have the confidence and the knowledge and the skills to have those difficult conversations and then support someone. So I think where 1333 is heading is not just a crisis support line, but also a broader picture in providing well-being to all Sri Lankans through schools, through workplaces, and so forth.
So Chetha, thank you for that. But I also want to sort of steer this conversation towards one thing I've been very impressed with talking with Ranil is that you'll actually keep stats, that you'll have stats. And that's, I think, a really important thing, because when we talk about well-being, when we talk about some of these impacts, we get stats from all over the world, but I've never been able to find any in Sri Lanka. And then Ranil and I were talking before, and some of the stats were pretty eye-opening for me in terms of how much the hotline is being used. And then if you also look at it from, are there differences in gender, in any other, diversity aspects that you all do manage or that you all do monitor? Ranil, do you want to share some of those numbers with us? Because I felt that is definitely worth a conversation, because there are many, I felt, stories coming out of that also that I think steer towards some of the work that you guys are doing, and for us also to be aware that we have a responsibility, each of us, to help ourselves as much as help others, like you mentioned, Chetha. So if I may move the conversation to some of those stats, Ranil, that you had with you. Have we lost Ranil?
Hello.
Hi.
Yes.
Yeah. So in the mid-90s, Sri Lanka was number one in world suicide. We had 54 male suicides per day, right? Just male alone. But now we have dropped down, and I believe that is because of the many services that are available in Sri Lanka, and also the improvement in the service providers and also the medical sector. Because before suicide was criminalized in Sri Lanka, now it's removed. It's no more criminal act, and so therefore there is a positive change. But unfortunately, still, um, if you look at the 2019, the total suicides for Sri Lanka were 3,135, and in that female suicides are 646, male 2,489. Then in 2020, again total stats 3,074, and out of that, female 590, male again a staggering 2,484. Then in 2021, there was again a rise. In The total was 3,277. Male suicides again, to 2,600. Sorry, female suicides was 645, and that now you see the difference there. There's a massive difference. It's like about 4 times more. The male suicides are about 4 times more than female suicides. But if when you come to the call center, when you come to 1333, when we look at our stats, uh, the numbers are the opposite. We have more females calling. Now we generally average about 2,500 calls per month, and in that we will have about 1,900, 1,800 females calling, right? And the balance will be, of course, male, and then other gender. So you see the difference. Now females, they'll come out and talk and share their problems, whereas males won't, and that affects our suicide rates. And right now in Sri Lanka, we have 12 to 15 suicides reported daily in Sri Lanka. So that is still a high number, and we should we our target is to bring that even less, and so that is where the stats stand.
So Ranil, did I hear you right? When you all started measuring these, it was something as staggering as 50 odd per day. Did I hear you right?
Yes, no, before we started, actually that was the WHO stats. In
Okay.
96, 95, 96, it was 54 male suicides per day.
So, and now I mean, it's definitely come down by almost like 400-500%, which is
Yes.
great work in terms of all of the work you all do, along with other suicide prevention lines that are in play right now. But, I mean, that's amazingly impactful in terms of that there is change and there is a direct correlation between the two. Why I'm talking about that is, I think the other aspect of this for me is the stigma. And that I'm asking, I'd like to ask you all about the fact that there are hotlines which are confidential and nobody knows. I have my confidentiality. Does that help in scenarios like Sri Lanka and I think a lot of the Asian countries where the stigma is still quite prevalent? Versus talking to, what I mean is, like, instead of talking to a friend that, I'm depressed, I have these kinds of things, versus talking to, a stranger where they don't know you. Do you see that as being a helpful angle to it?
Yes. See, now if we work with quite a lot of organizations, right? The Rotaract, Interact, and Rotary being one of them, right? We see that in the more talk about, right? It's still the stigma is carried, and they still don't want to talk about any mental issues. But now we see quite a lot of young people actually openly talking about it, saying that they would like to get help, saying that they are going through some issue, saying that, hey, can I get help? or can you recommend help? And so we see the younger crowd opening up, and I believe that that is a direct impact on organizations like 1333 and other organizations coming out and talking about mental issues, right? I remember, not long ago, leprosy was looked down upon, TB was looked down upon, HIV was looked down upon, but today we openly talk about it. We openly, have medication for it, and we have family members who are going through it, and we are, there is no more shame, right? So I believe that the more conversations we have, the more we, let's talk about mental well-being, mental illness, and problems like that. uh, I think the stigma will slowly go off, but before, the stigma was very, very high. I mean, people would not basically talk about it, and that is why people would call, a service like 1333 and other services.
So I think one data point I'll bring in from my corporate world and my HR experiences, when you think of medical insurance, speaking to a psychologist was not something that was covered 10 years ago through your medical insurance, versus now it is. At least in companies that I've been in, it is. So you're right, progress in the right direction. And I think the stats are also showing that all the work that is happening right now and all the conversations happening is impactful. So I'm sure that's quite encouraging to all of you all with the good work that you guys are doing. If I may bring in the conversation, segue it into the Let's Talk that you mentioned, Ranil, because prevention, as always, would be the angle we should all look at, and there is a role each of us can play towards that. Could you share, Cheta, a little bit about the whole concept of Let's Talk and how that has been rolled out, the plans you'll have?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as Ranil said, we started with our CCCline 1333, and we started in 2009, and around about 2015, 16, I started to really question why people call a crisis support line, whether it be our service or any other service. And really question, because when you look at the stats, and Ranil always jump in and correct me here, most of the reasons, one of the major reasons people call us are due to relationship issues, economic problems, loneliness, obviously mental health and so forth. And things like relationship issues, economic problems, loneliness are something that most of us, experience in our lives. And it sort of boggled me why people would pick up the phone and call a total stranger that they'll never ever meet and talk about their concerns. Especially concerns maybe outside mental illness, for example, general concerns. So we then pondered and developed the program called Let's Talk, which we trialed in schools in Sri Lanka, and now I'm actually running it here in Australia in schools as well as organizations. And if I can share some screen with you, I might do that and actually just show you the model that we do have in Let's Talk. That'll really explain why, how important it is. So we look at just human behavior. We look at human behavior of value and the importance of being seen. I think we all know that, as human beings, we want to be valued. Everyone wants to be valued, and everyone wants to be seen. Acknowledged. And Barney, I don't know, or anyone who's joining here today, have you ever bought a car in the last 3-4 years, or something that's, and I tend to use the experience of buying a car. Have you ever bought a car? Remember how you've done so much research to buy a car? Barney, do you remember that time?
Yeah, I don't do too much research, but yes, I've done my research.
Yeah, so you know, you've done some research, you've actually seen a few cars, and finally you bought the car you love. Yeah, and during that whole process, did you notice more of those cars on the road?
Oh yes, your eye
Yeah,
goes.
so yes, so there's this natural phenomena called, when you value something, when you actually focus on something, you tend to see it more often. And it's the same thing as valuing human beings. When you value the people in your life, whether it be your partner, whether it be your colleagues, whether it be your children, when you start valuing, you start seeing them. And basically, Let's Talk takes that as the real purpose behind the program, and says, how do we value and make people feel more valued and feel seen by using the Let's Talk strategies. And the strategies are T for tell, A for acknowledge, L for listen, and K for keep in touch, which is actually called talk. So let me explain what this means. T stands for tell. So tell, Barney, is not about you telling me your concerns. It's actually me seeing the telltale signs in you and approaching you. So it's actually totally opposite to CCCline 1333, where people call us, but as a Let's Talk mentor, you know, we train teachers and workplace staff in being a Let's Talk mentor. A Let's Talk mentor would actually be trained to tell when somebody's in distress and approach them.
So they'll be
And
able
when
to
they do approach,
they'll be able to spot the telltale signs of
there's
somebody.
to spot, you know, are they frustrated? Are they angry? Are they sad? Are they crying? And don't get me wrong, this is not the telltale signs of necessarily mental illness. This is telltale signs of people's feelings. So, you know, how do you spot depression or anxiety or bipolar? You know, unless you really study it in depth, you know, we can miss some of these. But as average human beings or everyday human beings, we could tell that our kids are sad. We could tell that our husband and wife is frustrated. You know, these are normal human telltale signs that sometimes we dismiss, okay, depending on the bias we have on the person. Okay, depends on if you like them or you don't like them. Okay, do you value them or not value them? So tell is about seeing the telltale signs, but not just seeing the telltale signs, but also wiping off the bias that you already have about that person. Because if you have the bias, we call it the bugs on the windscreen, we can't see the road ahead of us. So once, say I saw some telltale signs in you, Barney, you know, you're frustrated because of, hey, power cuts in Sri Lanka, right? and you know, I approached you, and you know, you were frustrated, and you know, you were anxious about, you know, even having this program and not having a power cut in the middle of it. You know, I could easily say, don't worry about it. Or I could easily say, you know what, that happened to me too. I could easily say that, no worry, I'll fix it. But it's really about acknowledging that you're feeling frustrated. So we miss that step of really acknowledging, validating the person and their feelings. And then the importance of listening to really get to the heart of the concern, and then keeping in touch, whether I can help you, Barney, or maybe I need to, you know, put you in touch with somebody else who can, you know, assist you. So this is the program that we run. And eventually what we're saying is, if you value the person enough, if you see the person enough, you will lend an ear for them to be heard. So, you know, if you ever have a conversation with someone and you feel at the end of it, oh my gosh, I really feel heard. This person really made me feel heard. What you're really saying is that you felt valued and seen by this person. And these are the strategies we go through in the program to be heard, valued, and seen through the talk strategies. So that's pretty much a nutshell of the model. And you know, for us, it's about really spreading this in the corporate world. This is spreading this in schools and universities, that everyday people can learn the model, understand the process, and really be have compassion towards a fellow human being, to listen to make people feel valued and seen.
Thanks, Chetha. I've been doing, this has been rolling out for a while. I've seen it in the corporate world in Sri Lanka that you've been involved in. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey in terms of what you all have actually seen, the acceptance of it, any hurdles that you all have had to jump over? Can others get involved and support all of
Yeah,
that?
look, one of the first organizations that actually took this on board, the first two, in fact, I think you came to one of the programs. This was prior to the COVID pandemic. I actually flew down to Sri Lanka. Ranil was there. I think it was March 2020 when we actually did the first program at MAS Krida with Sarinder and his group, and also IFS with Stephen Keys and his group in Colombo. And it was a fantastic program. And just to give you an idea how that's progressed, Sarinder and his team has contacted us, and we just did another group of Let's Talk mentors at Mars Krida. And also IFS has really taken that on board. They contacted us during the pandemic and said, look, a lot of people are working from home, they feel isolated. Can you please do a program for us, not just in Sri Lanka, but for their global staff in various countries. So we did that program during the pandemic, and actually I just finished the 4th program for IFS just last week, I think. So they've got over 50 plus mentors trained, and I think MAS, if I'm not mistaken, Ranil, they probably have about 25 as well, close to 25 trained or 25 trained.
Yes, I think right now they have about 28.
Fantastic. And there is interest. I think Ranil, you're the best person to know how the interest is in especially in Sri Lanka for the program. So
Sorry,
we
Ranil.
can't hear you.
With IFS and MAS coming on board, Sarinder has also been pushing it amongst the other organizations at MAS. And right now we have inquiries from Maharaja and other organizations who would like to take on the Let's Talk program, and even the EAP program that we want
You've gone on mute again, Ranil.
to roll out.
Yeah, I think, Barney, we were talking about EAP with you when you were in your previous organization, and something that we want to continue and support organizations, because we have the fantastic model there for crisis support as a free service, but then we also have now the resources to provide EAP, which stands for Employee Assistance Program in Sri Lanka as well.
Thank you. I mean, this also kind of segues well into the role corporates can play. One, when it comes to well-being, but also one of the other areas that DCLK is very involved in is about inclusion, diversity inclusion, and what companies can do to create that environment of feeling accepted, feeling psychological safety, all of that. Have you seen companies kind of making the connection? Have you got any sort of feedback from your managers or people who have gone on these programs towards the difference they feel, towards how their, the teams feel, the acceptance, the feeling of belonging in their teams?
I can definitely give you some feedback on IFS, because we deal with IFS globally. So we train their staff, not just in Sri Lanka, but also in Japan, Singapore, Australia. And the feedback I got, in fact, I had a gentleman called Jason Pierce, who's the, what's his role? CTO, I think, Chief Technology Officer. And he openly talks about his depression. And we trained Jason a couple of years ago as to be a Let's Talk mentor. He's a real champion now in the organization. and he came out and talked about how he has been, managing with depression for the last 17 years, but not really talking about it openly, and that sort of vulnerability of a high-level manager coming out and talking about their mental health conditions openly has really made a big difference in the whole culture transformation of inclusion, because end of the day, Barney, you talk this like this is your bread and butter, right? Inclusion, diversity, equality. I always say, diversity is like, it's like seeing that bigger picture. It's about embracing difference. Equality it's about seeing that everyone, whether they're on top or the bottom or whatever you want to call it in between, are all equal. And inclusion is about taking this and that and bringing it to your heart, is to be included. Okay, so those three concepts really starts with the really important fact of inclusion. And inclusion is the first step of psychological safety, because inclusion is about, we have a right to be included. We have a right, not a privilege, a right to be included, and we have a worth when we are born, not necessarily, sometimes we are judged as worthy, but we have a certain worth that we bring to this planet, and we have a right to be included. And that inclusion is that first step of feeling or having those steps into psychological safety, feeling included, feeling safe to learn, feeling safe to contribute, and most importantly, the pinnacle, feeling safe to challenge the status quo. Okay, and this is where it all gets unstuck, to challenge the status quo. And that's why Let's Talk is all about letting everyone talk safely, is get to that pinnacle of psychological safety where it's not seen as a challenge. It's actually seen as an opportunity to innovate, opportunity to continuously improve. And I always talk about psychological safety in two simple dimensions: the ability for anyone in a company or at home to put their hand up and say, hey, I've got a great idea, without being humiliated, judged, or even punished. Or even put the other hand and say, hey, I made a mistake, I stuffed up, without feeling humiliated, judged, or punished. If any organization, if any leader, hand in heart says, yes, I accept all ideas from my staff, I accept all mistakes from my staff, that doesn't mean that you're gonna live with mistakes. You have to correct mistakes and learn from it, not about repeating mistakes. But if organizations allow people to have ideas and make mistakes, that's where true innovation comes in. That's where true inclusion comes in as well, because without innovation, without psychological safety, there is no innovation.
So you're right about, especially on the mistake side, and I think if I may elaborate on that a little bit more, Chaita, the issue becomes we are taught almost to hide those mistakes, because that's going to come and bite us. So psychological safety, the Let's Talk, if you're going to focus that on your managers, is actually equipping the managers with the tools to be able to actually create that work environment that is going to be more productive. I mean, if we talk about the D&I space, which is what yes, I do talk about that a little bit too passionately, I think sometimes, is all about getting the best out of people. If you want to look at it from a business perspective or business value, it is, if you want to be selfish, it's to, innovate and get top line, bottom line. But the where it stems from is, like you rightly said, people can feel themselves so that they can come up with their ideas coming from their backgrounds, and that diversity of their background is where the magic actually comes out, because experience is very different to yours. And I think,
and it's also sustainability. Leaders, companies might get very quick results if they, it's a bit like, telling a child, don't do that. We're being very directive, don't do that. And you know what? You have instant success up to a point where they'll keep doing it again. Okay, it's not sustainable. But if you tell a child, understand the reason this is important, understand the consequences of this, and how you can learn by not following these certain behaviors, that might take a long time, but it's definitely be more sustainable and life-changing. So it's really a short-term, long-term game. If you have a finite mindset, you'll look at the bottom line. If you have an infinite mindset, you will look at growth and innovation and continuation.
So I think what I'd like to share from my experience in coming and watching some of these programs is it is a life skill that you're providing. And when I say, okay, most often the first group in a company we would like to provide this would be managers or people who impact other people. But the way I saw it is, this is the same skills that will be so valuable for me as a parent. This would be the same skills that would be valuable for me in my community when I'm, even your friend group, family group, or your team. So it is actually a life skill. And as much as you'll pitch it in the well-being space, I almost say this is one of the most fundamental, managerial or leadership skills that companies should.
Well, and the pandemic has brought this invisible wall between work and home. It's broken it. And who today, any leader who says, keep your troubles at home, it doesn't really understand human behavior. If any leader that says, any spouse that says, keep your problems at work, doesn't understand human behavior. Okay, we bring our home to work, we bring our work to home. We're not robots that we can switch things off. The more we understand that the best we do is in our life, and we talked about well-being. Well-being is right across our life. It's not just something that happens at work. And well-being, we always think about well-being as something that we have to do. And if you look at it, the word well-being is about being well, not doing well, if you know what I mean. So it's a bit like being a human being. We are a human being, not a human doing, but we are so focused on doing things and having so much expectations, we forget to actually be. So being, well-being is about just being, with less expectation and actually enjoying what is there that's in front of you, being grateful for what is in front of you, and enjoying what's in front of you, than expecting that we need to do more.
So I'm hearing a lot about mindfulness there as well, right? When you bring in the word being. To me, I get very excited about all this because, I've been in management, I've been in the corporate world for the past, I'm going to say about 20 years, at the risk of dating myself, but none of these conversations.
You must have started when he was 2 years old, were you?
Thank you for that. But none, this kind of conversation I've started hearing, I'm going to say, in the last 5 years at max, at least for me. So this is very much a progression, a positive progression in my opinion, and one of the most basic requirements when you are dealing with, well, from everything I've learned from you guys, it's about dealing with yourself, but when you start having to deal with somebody else, these are some fundamental skills, fundamental tools you can have, which I think supersede work or, home life or work life. It is linked to everything.
Well, the biggest challenge of dealing with somebody else is to deal with yourself first.
Yeah, we need to have another full conversation on just that topic. that topic alone.
It's a matter of, do you act or react? And you know, we know that, you know, we know that mindfulness plays a huge component. And in fact, mindfulness, you know, is really about being in the present moment, good, bad, or ugly. Mindfulness is not about creating this fantastic place that is really not there. Mindfulness is actually saying, you know what, I'm a bit anxious right now that the power might get cut off. Okay, that's mindfulness. That's being in the present moment and being aware of it. And once you're aware of it, you know, and name it, they call it, if you name it, you can tame it. Otherwise, if you don't name it, it'll be creating that uncertainty, which creates anxiety. Anything that's uncertain, and we are full of uncertainty these days. And more we talk about uncertainty, because there's one thing sure about life is that uncertainty will keep being uncertain, right? And it's like the change is the only constant we have at the moment. So the more we talk about our uncertainties, we are naming and we are taming it. So more we tame it, the more we'll be less anxious, and the more less anxious we are, the more you know, well-being or happiness we will experience.
Thank you for that. Actually, I've never heard it explained like that, but that makes a lot of sense in terms of just being able to identify it is the beginning. And I think the trouble we get ourselves into is because we're always running away from it or trying to hide it or cover it, you know, fill it with something. Thank you so much for that, Chaitha. We have sort of come to the end of the 45 minutes that I promised that I will take your time up on. Are there any final words on CCCline and Let's Talk that you'd like to share that would be helpful in terms of what you are taking forward and how DCLK or any viewers that this will be shared with can offer, get involved in? You'll do some other events also, right? Around Let's Talk to promote it. Any events coming up?
Yeah, over to you, Ranil. I mean, the bikeathons in the horizon. Definitely, we need more support for 1333 and Let's Talk. So for me, my message would be any organization, any leader who's watching this, I would like to find out a bit more about Let's Talk. We can definitely, we can talk and provide references and examples how, and we didn't talk about the benefits, you know, we've actually got tangible benefits in the program where people are reaching out, you know. Mental health is something that, you know, people are talking about more often. You know, schools are saying there's more connectedness in schools between teachers and students. So there's tangible results that we are actually seeing at the moment. But over to you, Ranil, in terms of, you know, what other things people can reach out to, especially the bikeathon, for example.
Yeah, so the bikeathon happens in August, from the 29th of August to the 10th of September. 10th of September being World Suicide Prevention Day, and it's a 1,333 kilometer ride from 13 days, covering 13 cities to create awareness again on the 1333 number, and also to raise funds to sustain our service. Also on the 10th of October, which is the World Mental Health Day, we are planning on doing what we call a Let's Talk and Walk. So we're planning on that. And those are the two main events that are coming for 2022. And you can find out more about these events on our website, www.1333.lk. And yeah, you can contact us and be part of these events.
Thank you, Ranil. And were these events happening annually in the past, even through COVID, or did you all have to take a break and this is a year that we can start all of it?
Yeah, the bikeathon, yes, during COVID as well, we had the bikeathon. Of course, we had the proper permission, had the proper guidelines. We followed the proper guidelines. And this year, the bikeathon will be our 9th consecutive year.
Wow.
Yeah, so started with I think about 15 riders, Jeta.
It was,
Yeah,
it was a small, well, not really small. We had a lot of riders from Sri Lanka, and last year, especially with the COVID situation, a lot of us from Australia couldn't come, but the Sri Lankan team just went from strength to strength. There was a lot of riders. We raised a lot of money to sustain the crisis support center. So there's a lot of. It's really good to see from my end that here's a program that's sustained, and thanks to Ranil and the committee in Sri Lanka, that there's an amazing amount of work, hard work to keep it going. But yeah, if anyone wants to definitely find out more about the bikeathon, let's talk. Please contact Ranil, and he can definitely help.
Okay, thank you so very much for your time. Thank you for all the information, the knowledge, and also the contact information. I will get that information from you, and when we're putting this on our social media, I'll actually put that in the caption also, because I think this is something that is needed for all of us here. And I think what you all are doing is to help bring out the promote it, but the visibility is what I think is making the world a difference. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barney, for having us and for all the wonderful work you do.
And hopefully we'll connect again, because I'm thinking there are ways that we can actually collaboratively push this out, because now DCLK is getting involved in quite a bit of training in the corporate sector. So I think some of these points you mentioned, especially on the Let's Talk component, and even thinking about well-being and how we connect it with apps so that they become, ways of connecting without us having to necessarily be there. So there are lots of activities and lots of interests that have already come my way. So hopefully 2022, 23, I'll be able to connect with you all with some of these other interesting and exciting initiatives also. Thank you so much again.
Thanks, Barney.